Yordenis Ugas'S sustained a brutal right eye injury at the hands of Earl Spence Jr., and in this video we'll take a closer look at what exactly could have happened here and what the doctor was doing to make this decision. Here on the left cheek, we can see this malar prominence, this zygomatic process, this sort of bump on the left side of Ugas'S face. If we look though on the right side, you'll see how it's just kind of flattened. It's just sort of sunken in. Now, some of that can be because of the soft tissue swelling around the eye or around the orbit here, but also it's important to see that there's kind of just this flattening of that malar eminence, of that zygomatic process, that bump that you feel right there in your cheek. And so that's going to be the primary location that we worry about an orbital fracture whenever people get repetitive trauma to the eye like this. Obviously, the right decision was made here because even after the fight, Ugas himself said that he was unable to see out of that right eye. And it's not so much just the swelling, because just with this degree of swelling, you're not going to be able to let light transmit into the eye. It's more so the concern for the bones being fractured and how that can affect the integrity and the health of the eye. Looking at our biodigital anatomy tool here, I've highlighted those bones that make up the orbit, and specifically this area right here, that bump, that's that malar eminence, that zygomatic process. That's that area where we see that contour that looks like it's flattened on the right side of Ugas'S face. The exam that the doctor was performing to determine whether or not Ugas could continue wasn't just about whether or not he could see, in terms of if light could actually get into his eye. He was checking some key motions of the eye because that can give you a clue about whether or not the orbit could be fractured. So this is the first sequence when the doctor checked him the first time. Initially here, he's just palpating, but the next thing he's going to do is he's going to just assess his visual acuity. Now, obviously, it seemed like there could have been some language barrier here because it didn't really seem like Ugas was responding when the doctor was asking him if you're able to see, which makes these evaluations hard. But he's trying to see, number one, just can you see? He's trying to check and have him focus on just his nose, because by focusing on the doctor's nose, you really get a better sense of visual fields. If Ugas doesn't focus on the doctor's nose, he can move his eye off to the side and you can get a false sense of security for your visual field exam if you don't focus straight ahead. So that's why he keeps kind of pointing in his nose here, is he's trying to get Ugas to focus on his nose so that he gets a better assessment of his overall visual field. It's always hard in these situations to just ask the fighter, can you see? Because of course they're going to say yes. And so you're trying your best in the moment to do some sort of exam maneuver to see if they can accurately really answer that question. But it's really challenging. I've got to give this ringside physician props here because I think they did a great job given the circumstances. The next thing he's going to start doing here is actually checking his extraocular motion. So when he raises his finger up and out to the side, he's trying to check and see if Ugas is able to move his eyes to one side or the other. And in particular, look here, I've highlighted all these small little muscles that actually fire individually to move our eyeball in different directions. In the case of an orbital floor fracture, these bones here in the lower portion of the eye socket can become broken, of course. And what that can do is it can pinch or entrap the muscles on the bottom side of the eye. If that muscle is pinched or squeezed, then you can't look upwards because that eye is essentially anchored down. So if we're doing our physical exam check and we're worried about an orbital floor fracture, if the athlete is unable to look upwards, that's concerning. That's a sign they could have muscle entrapment from an underlying orbital fracture. I think they would have been totally justified to stop it the first time he was examined. The hard part, like I said, is the athlete's going to tell you they can see. It's hard to get a good objective sense of their real visual acuity. And for all we know, he was able to look upwards with both eyes. It doesn't look like the eye was as swollen the first time. The second time he was examined, there was absolutely no question here, not at all safe for him to continue. The right decision was made in stopping this fight. So in summary, our exam can raise concern for an orbital fracture when we notice this flattening of that malar eminence, that zygomatic process, that bump of your cheekbone, suggesting fracture where that bone has basically been depressed backwards. Obviously, the swelling around the eye is concerning, but if the eye is able to be observed, having the athlete look upwards is a good physical exam test to check for entrapment of the muscles around